This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we are live on our YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch channels with Mia Koo. And we're glad to have her. This is the first time we've ever interviewed you on this program. And so we're happy to have you on the show.
Thank you, Keith. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me. So excited.
Well, we've been a podcaster since 2018. We mostly were on Anchor FM and Spotify. But now we've branched into YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. And we still are on Spotify. We still are on Apple and all these other ones as audio only. But now we have the added benefit of being able to do video and talk to people and actually see them on camera, which is pretty cool. So we're going to actually talk. We're going to talk about one of your new single, "Back in My Arms," and so we're going to actually cue it up. We got it queued up. We're going to kind of see it a little bit. So we got it in here. It's on In Bloom 2021.
Yes, In Bloom.
Yeah, so
let's go, Marcus.
So
thank you for having me, Keith.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome to have to be able to talk to people. What we like to do on this program compared to the other one is actually show and listen to people's music. In this case, we don't have a video, but we are going to play the Spotify single in its entirety. So once we start it, we're going to put you on mute, and then we'll have you come back, and then we'll talk about like your whole process of how you've been an artist and what you've done, your whole history, kind of do a behind the music kind of thing with you.
Cool.
So we're going to get into this single right now. We're going to put you on mute, and then we're going to play your song, and then we'll be back on the backside. We'll talk.
All right. Awesome. Enjoy, guys. Thanks, Keith.
So we're getting into it now. So I'm just going to put you on mute, and then I'm going to kick it off. So I'm going to kick it off now. Just got to get in there and hit the button. Back in My Arms. Here we go.
Okay.
Yes,
Woo!
I went back in my arms, and we're back with Mia Koo, and we like to be able to show people, what the music and actually have people hear it is one of the things that we couldn't do in the audio only version of the podcast, and now we can do that. So that's
Oh,
an added
really?
benefit. Yeah, yeah. In the old audio podcast, it didn't have an ability to play, yeah, music inside the tool. You just couldn't do it. It wouldn't work right. Um,
That's cool. Like StreamYard. That's what you're using,
yeah,
right?
yeah. You can actually do MPEG-4s and YouTubes, and we're using it for
Oh, okay.
a whole like we're going to be doing a concert with like 22 bands that we've talked in July, and they're
Oh,
all
yeah,
going to
you
be
were
there.
saying that.
Yeah, they're all going to be
Okay, well, look, stay tuned, guys. We got a concert coming on
yeah.
what is it called?
It's called the PEG or Phantom Electric Ghost Bedroom Producer Festival 2021,
Oh, I
and
like that.
everybody who's been on the show since 2018, not everybody, but everybody that we've invited, anybody who's been on the show to come and perform. Some people are giving us like video performances. Some people are doing live. A lot of people are doing live. I would say like 70% of the bands are doing live and 30% are doing video. So it's kind of cool.
Oh,
Um, but
okay.
we're excited. We're gonna get into your whole background. We like to get into like we start at the beginning with every artist. So we ask them like how did you first get into music? I mean, that's usually people are so passionate about music, but like at what age did you start in your music career? When did you start?
So I was probably like 3 years old, like when I was starting to sing Ave Maria by Schubert by my mom, and I couldn't go past the first phrase, I think, because it wasn't perfect, and I was working on my vowels for, you know, since three. So, it started because of my mom, actually. She is classically trained and went to Juilliard, Carnegie Hall, and was a concert violinist, and also studied voice and went on to play with prestigious orchestras. And, like the New York Phil, Boston Phil, and a couple other really, I'm sure she could go on about it, but I got that from her. I grew up playing violin, and typical Asian tiger mom, I guess, story is,
Yeah,
I'm half Chinese, so you kind of have to fulfill. If you're not a musician, you're either a doctor or a lawyer, and my
yeah, you
mother
go to
is
cram
both
school.
as
Cram
well.
school.
So,
So you were doing cram school for musicians.
yeah, exactly. That was, I kind of just grew up with classical music, and I had a good program, and I went to Walt Whitman High School, and in that they had an orchestra, and they've had orchestra in the program since I don't even know, before sixth or around sixth grade is when they start um, doing that. And I grew up in a classical world, and definitely that I think shaped and gave me a foundation to explore other genres. And
Yeah, I think
sorry, I've
that's
got
the
my dog
key
here.
genre. I think a lot of musicians like start with the classical because it's like the basic. I started on the wind instrument.
Right, and I love that. I think it's like super important. Like you have a foundation, and if you don't have a foundation, you can't really. I mean,
Well, it's
it's
good. Yeah,
different for everybody, but it's good. It's good to have. I'm not saying you need to be a classical
yeah,
musician, but it's like having, Kerrygold butter. It's
yeah.
like an
Well, I
ex.
think it's like the base. Like, I mean, there's a lot of blues guys, right? There's a lot of jazz guys that might have just had natural ability. You get guys like Hendrix and stuff. They had natural ability,
Yeah,
but but it's good to know how to sight read. I did appreciate on my wind instrument being able to sight read. It was just a
right.
treble clef. And then I went and found is like, well, I can't really write pop songs on the clarinet because that's all I have is the treble clef, right? I don't have the bass clef. And I'm not really, I can't do the chords. I'm mostly doing like lead lines. And
Right.
so,
It's one voice instrument.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So I said, well, I went and invested in like keyboards. And I went and took classes and how to play piano. And then I realized I
Yeah.
wanted to play synthesizer because then it's a writing instrument and you could learn how to play everything. And
Right.
so that's how I kind of, and this is before DAWs. This is before digital audio workstations. I'm a child of the 70s, right? So I got a Casio, I
Yeah.
got a little Yamaha. It's like 1978. There's no MIDI just came out. The computers aren't that good. If you're going to record, you record onto a Tascam 4-track or a Fostex, and that's how you record. You didn't have a DAW, you didn't have GarageBand, you didn't have Fruit
Yeah.
Loops, you didn't
And
have,
you better do it well, right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
better not mess up, or else they're gonna have to like redo the entire band is gonna have to re-record everything. It depends
Well,
what
that's
your
what we
high
used to do. You had to do take 10, take 15. That's
That's
punch in,
right.
punch out. I actually appreciate the old days of, coming from being a sight reader in a concert band and then being
Yeah.
in a marching band and then being in
You'd
a
actually
jazz
have to be
band.
good. You'd
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
have to do
Oh,
what you're saying that you do, which is, foreign now almost, not to be,
well, I
say
mean,
that, but
I
oh,
think it's a great equalizer. I think computers are a great equalizer in that people who are living in a setting where they can't have a live instrument because people would yell at them. Right, like, you can't have a drum set because your neighbors would yell at you. You can't
oh
keep
yeah,
playing your
I
guitar
think about that.
because people will yell at you because you're in an apartment building. So having,
Well, only
like,
if you're
a band.
bad, though. Only if you're bad. Do you know what I'm saying?
Maybe.
Because I practice all the time. I sing opera, and not to say I'm good or anything, but I've been studying opera for the past 2 years in school and really trying to develop my operatic voice. My childhood was spent developing my violin skills, and being a pop rock person later on. But
Yeah.
I have a long story. I've been at it since 3, so.
Yeah, well, that's what we're so you've been doing it since you're 3 years old.
Yeah,
And
I
so
mean, technically, right? Like, I'm learning Ave Maria at 3 and can't go past the first phrase. So there's
but that
definitely.
so you've been working on music since you were 3 years old, but then when did you realize, you were on an instrument, and then you realized that your voice
Yeah.
is an instrument? Did you
So,
realize that right away?
well, yeah, and I mean, I've always sang. So singing, my mom said I came out singing, and I guess I was always a ham. I love to be center stage and whatever, just be me, and I don't know, always have fun. So I guess I always did that. And then eventually, like, I learned guitar. My mom was dating somebody at the time who was like my stepdad eventually, and I learned guitar. I was enamored with Josie and the Pussycats. I literally was like, oh my God, I saw the movie. I think I was 13, and I was, used to playing violin and just kind of, violin all the time in school. And that was my life and in competitions. And so I just, wasn't exploring anything else at the time. But then I heard Josie and the Pussycats and I was like,
So was that
oh,
an electric guitar or an acoustic guitar?
it was a Fender Strat. I
Oh,
had a
that's
real
pretty cool.
Strat. It wasn't a Squire. Okay, guys.
That's
So
cool. Because
yeah,
I
I
know
had,
I kinda date myself, like, when you talk about Josie and the Pussycats, I remember the cartoon. Like, I was a child of the '70s, and I used to see the
oh yeah,
Hanna-Barbera cartoon. So when you say
I've
Josie
seen
and the Pussycats, I
that.
actually don't think about the movie, I think about the cartoon in,
Yeah,
like,
the
1974 or
real
something.
one. Right. Yeah. So um yeah, I loved them, and I decided it was time for me to do this and play guitar. My mom's fiance at the time, my kind of stepdad, was teaching me, and I've like I would practice all the time, and it's similar to violin, and I just ended up kind of playing a lot more.
Did
Then
that
I
get you
started doing
more into
guitar
pop music?
lessons
I mean, the fact that you were into Josie and the Pussycats, you went from doing classical right
to
into
just
kind of
do
pop.
it again. Yeah, exactly. Because I was like, nobody at 13 thinks like Bach is cool. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right, no, people want, I grew up, everybody liked the Beatles. Like, I'm a
Yeah,
child of the
like
'70s and, like, 72, '73, the Beatles still had this big impact, right? almost
Yeah,
everything that I grew up listening to was because of the Beatles, right? Like they had the Led Zeppelins, they had Rolling Stone, but it's because of the way the Beatles wrote
I
the way
love
they
the
did
Beatles.
that everything became deeper in pop. Like the songs,
Yeah,
people had albums like a Sergeant Pepper's or an Abbey Road, or you had bands like Pink Floyd, and so everything was a lot deeper than maybe what we have today because
oh,
people were doing like albums that really meant something. Like even like the Carpenters. I love
oh,
Karen Carpenter. I used to listen to the Carpenters albums in my like, and I was a little boy,
yeah.
little kid, and I was like, I was kind of crying from her voice.
I
Because
know. I think I mean, I've just felt the same way
her
about
voice
her.
was
I
so
mean, the
powerful.
Carpenters. So her voice is so haunting. It's just
But
oh,
the
and the
thing, even when
melodies,
she's
the songwriting.
even when she's singing something happy, there's like a melancholy in it. There's like a melancholy in her voice that's there like all the time, and it's beautiful, but it's painful too because yeah, now you know what happened to her. But like even during the
Right.
time before, we didn't know what was going to happen to her. We just like, wow, this woman's voice is so unbelievable. It was
It's
just
like
so
our tortured souls
yeah,
beautiful. Was she beautiful because, or was that a factor? You know,
yeah, yeah,
because she was, but rest in peace, Karen. We love you and such an inspiration, I think, to like
yeah.
me for
I think
sure. That
that
was
just
my grandmother's, one of my grandmother's favorite artists was the Carpenters and my mom. So I grew up listening to them. So, oh,
But the
so good.
songcraft, if you think about pop music, right, and you think about the Carpenters, and you think at the level of like capability, like her brother Richard Carpenter would create these awesome piano arrangements that are like you get like a Billy Joel or Elton John. He's like in that same kind of zone. I mean, he's writing these really beautiful chord arrangements, and it's like he worked with songwriters, but he like reinterpreted what they gave him. He worked with like a Neil Diamond and he'd rewrite it to fit Karen's voice. And
Wow.
it's just unbelievable. The level, I just appreciate that kind of artistry.
Oh, for sure. I think it's like the top of the top
Yeah.
is what we're talking about. So hopefully one day, we're gonna get to the top, guys. So keep
Yeah.
listening to Mia Koo and keep.
Well, I know that you put a lot of I mean you come from a background where you've got like the bones of understanding music. And if we look into your background, maybe we can talk a little bit more about like when you professionally got from wanting to be like cloning Josie and the Pussycats, you got your
Yeah.
guitar. So when did you get your first opportunity or somebody noticed what you were doing and give you that opportunity?
Well, I guess the biggest thing for me was the plain white tees. So I was 15 and I met Tom Higgenson from Plain White Tees. I think I was like 15, around that age. And he was a mentor to me. And we ended up, I was going to his shows as a fan. And eventually, I guess, enough shows. And we started talking. And I think I was so young, I would go with my mom, like, and my aunt, like they would be taking me and my sister to see like our favorite rock band. And it's like turned out that rock band would be supporting, one of the biggest singles I had when I was 15. And that was crazy for me. I got all these, it was a multi-platinum, and they were Grammy nominated that year. And it was just like, I was 15.
Well, How
I
how
mean,
did you
I don't,
get how did you get that close to somebody in the band like that?
it was like I went to the shows and one day I played a song for Tom, the lead
Mhm.
singer. And after, like, I don't remember, I think I went and took their guitar and I played them one of my songs called Black and White. And I was actually in a band that Tom later produced. And we were on tour for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or more, on and
Mhm.
off. And that was in my teen years, from probably like after high schools when like we actually like went. So I was 17 because I graduated a year early. 16 or 17, I'm not sure, but around that age. So I met Tom just like through going to his show, and then I played him some music, and I was like, hey, do you know any producers? I'm a singer-songwriter. I want to like do
Oh,
something with this, you know, and
but
I
you were
really
able to
loved
meet
the
him.
music, and it was
You were
rock
able to,
music at the time.
but you were
Huh?
able to meet him because you were in a band. Like you had been in a band. Is that why you were able to get that close to him?
No, you know what it was? They were so cool that they would go and meet their fans. If you know Plain White Tees, everybody knows
Oh,
that.
they would meet and greet at the meet and
Yeah,
greet table.
they're chill. Like they will go and talk to every fan. Like I'm
Oh, that's
pretty sure.
cool. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
like,
Because a lot of
and
some
that's
bands
what I
are so
learned
distant.
from them too. Like they're nice guys. Like when I met them, they were not like pretentious. They'd be at the merch table every time they would
Wow,
play, and
that's
then they
cool.
would be like, "Come meet us," or and say stuff like that. And I think, yeah, it was really supportive to me to like meet like my idols, like have them like talk to me,
Yeah,
let them
that's
play a
awesome.
song, you know what I mean, and then
Yeah, yeah.
produce me,
And I mean,
and
you
then
don't
like,
always get to meet the band because sometimes the bands have
yeah,
layers and you can't get to them, right? You might be able to get to a merch table, but they're actually not at the merch table. Like
right.
the bands like they're off the stage or gone, right? But a lot of smaller bands or even bands that are cooler,
But this
I
was
think,
before Hey There Delilah. So this
yeah,
was
yeah.
before their big song, and then I had two songs on that same album that of Hey There Delilah. So that was, you know, before I think they like blew the hell up. Like Hey There Delilah is a hit like across the
Oh,
world. So
yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
So it might have
the
been hard to get
shows
to
that
them
they were
then.
playing at the Knitting Factory, you know, they're playing these small kind of like couple hundred venues, couple hundred
Oh, so
people.
yeah, they
Venues.
weren't at
So
this like 10,000 people,
that's
so
what
you
I mean.
can't get
And then I
to
met
them.
them and then they blew up.
Yeah, so
So it
then it
was
would
kind
have
of
been
like
harder.
right time, right place. And I met Tom, and he's still one of my good friends to this day.
Awesome.
So what's up, Tom? If you're watching this, everybody go check out Million Miler. He just released a new album, by the way. So check it out, guys. Million Miler is Tom's new side project. It's really good. Like
That's
really good.
awesome that you stayed in
Yeah.
touch. It's cool to actually get those type of connections, you know? I think musicians, like, that's what I spend a lot of time, you know, I'm a musician, but I talk to musicians on my podcast, and one
Yeah.
cool thing I like to do is actually we've had people on the podcast actually like an interview and then go and go find that person and go work with that person. So
Oh my
I've
God.
I've
Okay.
had guests that go and say, "Hey, I really dug that person you interviewed." And they go on their own and say, "Hey, Keith interviewed me. I like your scene," and then they start working together. I
That's
think it's really
cool.
cool for artists to kind of cross collaborate or meet, and if I can help engage that, it's always good. That's what we like to do. But
Well, you're doing a great thing just by doing these shows and connecting people. And I think it's really cool. Like, I think I told you this off the show. It was like, Keith, like, this is cool. Like, you're just connecting all these people. And you're an artist yourself. And normally artists just go ahead and do their interviews and go ahead and do their life. But you're like making a business out of this. I'm like, okay, Keith,
well,
so keep
I think
following,
it's
guys.
cool to kind of like for a lot of years I just totally was heads down into my own work, and then I said, maybe I should pay it forward and actually take some of my time and actually talk to other artists, right? So back in 2016, what
Yeah.
happened was this guy found me, right? This guy found me on this other podcast platform that doesn't exist anymore. And he found my SoundCloud and he said, "Hey man, you got like tons of material." And I said, "Yeah, I'm kind of crazy. Got all this." So he interviewed me on his
Oh
podcast.
my God.
And then I said, "Well, what happened? I wonder if I would go to my Instagram and anytime somebody liked one of my songs, I said, maybe I should interview them." Right. So then I post all this stuff on Instagram and I said, well, anytime somebody that's an artist ever likes my stuff, I will go ping them back and ask them, "Hey, do you want to get interviewed on my podcast?" And that's my pitch. And I've been using that pitch
Yeah.
since 2016 and I get 3, 4 guests a week without
Wow.
agent, without anything. That's what I do. I just naturally, somebody likes my stuff or I like their stuff. And then I ask them, "Hey, you want to be on the podcast?" And
Yeah.
I don't deal with an agent. I just go directly to the person. I mean, I would try to say like out of 70 people I've interviewed, I've only had to talk to 3 agents. I've talked to people directly
Wow.
because I'd rather do that. Sometimes
Yeah.
people force me to talk to their agent, and I'm like, "Okay, fine." But I like to just do it direct,
Straight to
because
the source.
it's
I
artist
hear
to
that.
artist. it feels better, if I can just talk to somebody and say, explain what's going on,
Yeah,
without having, the layers.
I
But
know, I know. Well, you're doing such a good job, and I'm super honored to be here. And thanks for asking me. So,
so that's cool. So you're playing white tees, and you got a connection, and you got on the record. You did work. So what came from
yeah.
there? Like, give me the
So,
sequence.
yeah. What did you say?
Just give me the sequence of events that happened after you had that opportunity. Like, what were
Okay.
the other things that
Yeah.
started to happen?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I had two songs on that album, which I think it went gold. Um, and yeah, so I got what is it? A lot of publishing deal offers. So because
From
that
that,
album sold so much and I had
so
two
people
songs
started
on it,
coming to
and I
you.
was what?
Did you
Sorry.
get agents coming to you after you did that? Did people come to you?
Oh, yes, exactly. So I
Yeah,
had Universal, Warner Brothers, I was talking to, Royalty Network, who I'm with, a couple other indies. I had met with all the other majors before then for artist deals. So I had been around the block, like people kind of knew me. I was in a band called Kung Fu Girls that,
yeah.
Plain White Tees produced, and we had been touring and working it on MySpace and trying our best to be, known, so we were working it. Wait, what was the question?
No, I guess I'm just following like the next stage because you were able to get on a big album. You got
Yeah,
people paying attention to you. You got people wanting you to get into publishing with you, wanting you to
right.
do songwriting. So, like, how did you pick like your next opportunity? Did you kind of have to go through things and figure out which one you should do and which one you
Yeah.
shouldn't? Did you get an agent that kind of said, "Hey, you should do this, you shouldn't do that"? Did you have anybody helping you?
So touring wise, we actually, you know, through the Plain White Tees, we got on with APA as a booking agency.
Hmm.
So we were with them, and they booked a couple tours for us. But that was only for maybe like a year or two. So that was kind of the touring side. And that was through Tom, who helped us get that. Um, thanks, Tom. This is like the Tom Higgenson interview. I can't right now. No, but he was super pivotal in my life, and this is part of my story.
It's good to have somebody that helps you. Like, it's really cool when there are other artists that, they don't have to, but they help another artist and they launch it and they maybe don't even
Yeah,
talk about it. They just
like we
might
went on
do it.
tour with them, and they helped us go on tour with them, and APA set those tours up. So that was cool. And with the Frantic, I think it was another band in Tria Paris, and we had independent tours. So, but what came out of that was the publishing deal with Royalty Network, is who we eventually ended up signing with. So
Mhm.
we were in the talks with Universal and a couple other that I mentioned before, but that we wanted to be with somebody who we knew, you know, is one thing to go major, but there's a lot that comes with that. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of
it's
times if you go
a
major and
risk.
you don't hit it big, then you get dropped, right? Like,
Yeah, and what is that percent? Sorry, guys. Like my friend musicians who went major, a lot of them deal with a lot of BS too, I think, and get shelved constantly. Not just
yeah.
because you're
It's
signed
sometimes like,
to a major doesn't make it like any better than like a really good indie. So Royalty Network, even though they weren't a major, I knew that they had, they were legit and they were good and they have great clientele, and they still get me jobs to this day. That's how I'm in the trance field. So thank you, Royalty
that
Network.
I think that's
You know?
really why a lot of people are indie, why a lot of people do indie work. Because if you think about it, right, if you try to get with a major, right, and they're trying to get you to like sell 500,000, million, 2 million, right? And
Right.
then it's like the problem is, even if you think again, my example is this all the time. You think about Prince, right? Purple Rain sold 8 million. Then Warner Brothers basically tried to say Prince got to hit that mark all the time. And the thing is, when you're an artist, even if you're big, like the Eagles never hit bigger than Hotel California. Prince never hit bigger than Purple Rain. You always drop down, right? So even when
Yeah.
you got a guy like a Prince, he'll sell 8 million on Purple Rain, 2 million on Around the World in a Day, maybe 5 million on Diamond and Pearls. You never hit 8 million again. You don't. And if you get in a major, they have this expectation that
Right.
somehow you're going to hit that, and it's not realistic. You're most likely, your biggest thing is always going to be your biggest thing. And then you might be able to settle into 1 million, 2 million here and there, you know, and
And
maybe
the point is, that's not your money. That's not your money that they're giving you. Do you know what I mean? You have to pay them back. Like,
yeah. That's the problem,
it's
because
not
then
your
they
money. It's like a credit card.
Yeah, they
You know?
basically give you an unrealistic expectation that somehow you're going to hit that again. Like, you're the Eagles and you're going to do Hotel California 10 times. That doesn't happen, right? It doesn't
And
happen.
at the cost of what? At the cost of your music sound? At the cost of listening to every A&R meeting, you know, where they're like annoying the hell out of you?
Yeah, because it's like you're never going to hit the zenith of your career. You know, once in a while you get an artist that can do it, right? But it's very rare that you actually have multiple zeniths at that level. You usually don't. And you know, when they gear you, what I like about indie companies is that they'll realize, like, hey, you're gonna sell like 50,000, 100,000, and then you can still work, right? You could still do tours. You have people that will still be able to work because they don't have unrealistic expectations for what they're doing. They want to be happy, they want to be able to work, but they don't go crazy in debt thinking that you're going to hit this number that you're never going to hit.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I guess it works for so many people that did it. So, I mean, I know a lot of people who went the major route, like Play White Tees, for instance. Like Play White Tees, that worked out. So I'm not, you know, but also there's still not a Hollywood Records today. You know, not to say, but I think that there's also, you know, a time limit to like certain genres too. Like when you get older, you have to, like, you know, they're starting a Hollywood Records. So you're 40 years old, and then you have to write certain songs, or you're, you know, even myself.
You can't keep on doing, like, if you're a teeny bopper, right? You're only a teeny bopper for a while, right? So
and that was my music. It was young because I was young.
Everybody transitions.
Evolving. That's right.
Everybody evolves. If you think about the Beatles, right? Help, right? They were like a teeny bopper band. They were like the original boy band, right? The first Beatle records, they're like doing these things like Help, and, you know, all these songs that really aren't that. They were fun, but they weren't like Sgt. Pepper's. They weren't like the White Album, right? So they evolved. They evolved into a really powerful songwriting, deep songs that when they first started, they weren't like that. And I think if some people have an expectation that they're going to be like in this mode, like when you were 18 or 19 or 21, when you had your hit, that somehow you're going to keep on doing that when you're 34 or you're 28. You know, you can't. It's hard to do it
on the same label, or, you know, and you're a completely different person. I mean, I've been studying opera the past 2 years, so I'm changing my sound all the time, and I think that's.
Well, you're in a totally different genre that didn't exist. Trance didn't exist when you were doing what you were doing, right? When you first started, that didn't exist.
Or I guess it did exist. I mean, because for me, at least in my career, but it was in the 80s, right? I feel like trance has been around for a while. Is that what you mean? What do you mean?
No, but trance, it wasn't really called trance in the 80s. There was more new wave.
Oh, okay. See, this is where
I'm an electronic musician, so electronic music started with like new romantic, then became new wave, then became but modern electronic music has trance and EDM. It really wasn't known as that in that time. It's more new romantic. You know, if you think about Duran Duran, Flock of Seagulls, 80s music, that is called new wave or new romantic. Bands like The Cure, Depeche Mode, those type of bands. That's not trance, that's new wave. And modern trance is a different variation. It comes from that all electronic music kind of comes from a certain place, but there's certain periods that are very distinctive, like where you have, like, you know, EDM, bass, heavy trap, you know, electronica, the industrial, the different periods happen at different time periods, and so trance is kind of like a more modern variation of electronic music.
Okay. See, I'm also, you know, I'm not the expert, you know, in trance either. So I I've been writing for it, and I'm starting to understand more, and as I go, so I'm like, okay, because there's all these different subtypes.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's like
there's a
psytrance,
lot.
which is like a there's like a psychedelic version of trance called psytrance.
Yeah,
You have
I've heard of it.
dark wave, you have synth
Is that what
wave.
you do? Like Psy? Could you do Psy something? Your stuff's
I do
super.
like psytrance, and more my stuff is really like a variation of industrial and new wave.
Okay.
If you think about
Okay.
bands like Nine Inch Nails, like Nine Inch Nails is an
Okay.
industrial kind of punk, cyberpunk kind of band, like Trent Reznor. And
I kind of don't know their music.
well,
Um,
they're kind of dark. They have kind of a
okay.
punk edge, but yeah, there's different types of like electronic music. Some types of electronic music are more kind of guitar heavy, and
Okay.
still have
Yeah.
guitars in it or have a lot of power in it, and some of them are
Yeah.
more dance. I do more like psychedelic, guitar focused kind of punk background, or maybe even progressive.
Okay.
Like a band like a Genesis or a Yes, or like my
Okay.
inspirations are like the older electronic bands, like if you think about older electronic music, you think about like uh, Pink Floyd's what comes to mind. A band like
Okay.
Yes, a band like Genesis, like when Peter Gabriel used to be in Genesis, because he actually used to be the lead singer of Genesis before Phil Collins.
I
Um,
kind of don't know any of these bands. Like I know
yeah,
the names, but it's like
yeah. Well, that's the heavy
sorry.
electronic. That's what I'm into.
Okay.
That's the original electronic music that trance comes from.
Oh, okay. Well, I need to
Um,
do my homework because to me, trance is 128 dance music. I try to keep it pretty
yeah,
diatonic, and then I write like a pop dance song that could be like majestic. I had to Google it actually.
yeah.
Like,
It's a it has a very distinctive style. It's kind of narrow in its structure. Like some forms of modern electronic music are more narrow in their focus. They have certain
yeah,
structures, kind of like disco. Like disco is a very focused genre, has certain
right.
set of beats, right? Trance is the same way, EDM's the same way.
Yes.
If you get into
Yeah.
other types
Okay.
of electronic music, they're more open, right? So they can cross genre. So you can have rock, and you could have punk, and you could have classical and jazz mixed into some other types of electronic music. So it's not all one thing.
How
It
cool
could,
is that? So I'm definitely trance.
yeah, yeah, definitely. You're in a structure of trance, and I can hear it. And that's cool because that is a big popular. It's in the clubs. It's what people are kind of into. It's kind of like disco, the modern disco. It's like what's beat focused.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of beat focus, and people used to call it techno. Like when the new wave first came out, then they got techno, and then techno was kind of a variation of new wave, and now you got trance, and you got all this other stuff, deep
Oh
house.
my lord.
You
Then
have
you got techno. That's right. And
Yeah,
that's like
techno is a little
that's
bit
or
techno
something.
is before trance. It's like a
Oh,
trance comes out of that too, but it all goes back. Goes back in the
okay.
day. But it's like, it's just cool to understand, the flow of these things, because it kind of goes like in this age, people take multiple genres. People will take like an old 1920s genre and throw it into an electronic song. They'll take a
I love that.
flapper song and throw
Yeah.
it to a modern song. Well, they'll take a country song and throw hip hop into it. There's all
That
there comes
happens though
across
in
genres.
pop and in many things too, right? Like I guess when I think of all those things, it's like coming together that happens like everywhere now. I mean, it's like what else is there to do, I guess? Like
Well, it's cross
besides just
genre.
combining them all.
I think cross genre is like the way to be the way forward, because I think that if
Definitely.
you remember, disco died because people kind of got tired of it, right? So if you
Really.
have a genre and you do it to death, then some people have said that like EDM with the drop eventually could become boring if people don't innovate, right? Because if you always
Yeah,
have the drop in the same structure and you have the same structure all the time, eventually people say, well, it's kind of boring. I want something new, right? So
it's
what's
true.
cool is to actually take multiple forms and say, what if I took EDM and I threw a little hip hop into it, right? What if I took EDM and I threw psychedelic rock into it, or I put punk rock into it? Then you can extend it and make it turn into something else. And so that's kind of like, producers want to, they're trying to future think. You try to push things in multiple directions and not be in a box,
I love that though. That's what makes music different now. Everything coming
Everything
together. It's like a melting pot. You could do
Yeah, man,
any genre.
if you want to
Any
be the
put it
Bee
together.
Gees, if you want to do the Bee Gees, you could go do the Bee Gees. Like if you want to go and bring back Saturday Night Fever type sound, you could do it, and you'd have an audience that would like it, And
Yeah,
so
and it could be really good. I mean, for sure, I find myself always trying to like pull different things, because if you do the same genre, you're only writing in one genre. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, you got to like switch it up and combine everything. There's good stuff from all different kinds of music. So
yeah, I think that's just I think as an artist, as a musician, I get bored, right? So like a lot of being a keyboard player, I like to play classical and jazz, because those two forms kind of challenge you, and there's so many different periods in jazz. So if you say you do jazz, right, but there's like there's bebop, there's fusion, there's Afro,
blues, there's all the blues.
There's tons of forms, right? So you you don't get stuck. You could go and you could jump with somebody that's doing like Mingus. You could jump with somebody that's doing like Miles Davis. You could do Coltrane. You could do Dave Brubeck. You have so many different ways you can go. It's hard to get bored, and so it's like, to me, it's like if I want to play and I want to get really like challenged, I'll go play with a bunch of jazz guys, because then that's going to force me to play better.
That's true. Well, as a classical person though, you're either classical or jazz usually. So I don't know anything about jazz. Like, it's not my scene,
usually
but I appreciate it. But it's like you either go the jazz route or you go the classical route, and they're very distinct, and they don't do this. I feel like
it's weird, because it seems like the classical guys kind of like, oh, I can't do jazz, because they don't think it's like legitimate.
Well, it's not that. It's just such a different approach. It's like, I feel like classical is how perfect can you play one note, and jazz is how fast can you play a million notes. You know what I mean? It's just a different world. Like,
but it also can be like jazz can go very slow. It can be very moody. It kind of depends. Like, if you're in the bebop. Bebop jazz can be very slow and very melodic, and it can take in all kinds of forms. Like, you can go and suddenly throw in some show tune theme, and then throw in like a Bach theme, and then mix it up. So the thing about jazz is freeing, because you can throw many forms into it, and you can have structure just as tight as classical, and then go off and be dissonant. You could go and do dissonant. You could go and do something melodic. You could come back. You can change time signatures. You can change keys in the same song, in the same way that classical does too. So you have to have almost the same skill set as a musician to play it, because it can be very complicated. But
it's not that it's not complicated. I guess it's like just two different schools of thought, and historically as well. It's just different. And I mean, they do come together, I guess, like with when, like, who's a good example? Gershwin, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Gershwin.
Like, stuff like that. Like,
I mean, if you listen to Gershwin, like a Brubeck, Dave Brubeck Quartet did stuff that was like, really a Dizzy Gillespie. You get these big band jazz bands in the 40s have a lot of orchestration, a lot of stuff is written down. So they had like set songs that are written down as tight as classical music. Yet some jazz bands were very tight, and they play the same thing every night. And
it's true.
They had the sheet music.
But maybe nowadays, I don't know what the hell's going on. but music is just not in that direction anymore, or maybe not in the vein that, or where I know, or I need to like do more research or something.
Well, there's
But
like every form of jazz still exists. So you have the ones that are like the 1940 bands. You have
yeah,
modern fusion bands that are very kind of psychedelic jazz, kind of free form jazz that's very dissonant, kind of weird, goes off and
okay,
does stuff that's not melodic. But then
yeah,
you have yeah, so I into experimental jazz that goes off into non-melodic things. But then,
right,
like I said, like every genre is open and there's multiple forms of jazz. And there some forms of jazz are closer to like classical structures and some of them are more
right,
dissonant and more
exactly.
experimental. And pretty much
Dissonance. And,
yeah,
yeah.
everything that's out there is kind of like out there. It's like
But I respect jazz musicians, even though I'm classical. Do you know what I mean? Because it's hard to be out here as a musician. It's hard to
yeah,
do what we do. So I'm not, I love jazz. I like seventh chords. You
yeah.
know, I,
Yeah, I think it's just interesting when you get into like the whole history of music is really people try to stay in a lane and then you find out that you're bringing little elements to everything, is kind of where things end up being. Like kind
yeah.
of
And hey, that's what we were just talking about, the melting pot, right?
yeah,
Like, it's like the more you know. And I think a certain way because I know certain things about this, and other person knows something about this, and another person knows something about that. You know what I mean? And then we all come together, and then we have the radio.
yeah. Well, I think it's like it's a real talent to do pop music because like pop music is very or music that's more beat focused or something that's gonna get like a lot of mass acceptance, right? So if you're a musician and you're trying to do music that's actually gonna get, you know, you know, it's gonna get acknowledged and
Radio
people
play, or
yeah, radio
yeah,
play. There's a certain skill set to that that's a
that's right.
tighter type of writing skill, right? And if you're an
Completely.
experimental musician, you can say, well, some experimental musicians will look at that and say, well, I don't want to do that. But then again, like, it's like it takes a lot of work to make something that people want to listen to. you know,
Right. It's true. I mean, you might think, and sure, like there are some really awful songs, which I completely agree with you, and the notion that this simplicity is boring. But I think that it's really what you do with those notes. Do you know what I mean? And if it's
yeah.
catchy, good for you. Then you've done a good job.
But there's a brilliance in getting people to like the beat, to
Yeah,
like your
that's
melody
right.
and make it, to get in the top 10, top 20, top 100, that's a certain skill set. And you people can kind of put their noses up to certain the artists were like, well, I don't want to do that. Like, okay, fine. But you got to acknowledge that in that zone that producers and musicians and singers that can be in that zone and be on hit records, that should be respected just as much as somebody who does something that's like experimental and they get really good praise from the music magazines, but they don't sell anything.
Yeah,
It's like
for sure.
it's a different thing. It's like, okay,
It's
are you
completely
trying to get
different. Exactly. I mean,
yeah,
everybody likes different music as well. So it would
yeah,
be like foolish to say, one would be better than the other, I think, because there's networks and markets for everything,
yeah.
so you don't know. But I know what I do, and I stay in my lane, or maybe so I'm in the classical pop lane. That's where I am. So I
Well, that's
stay
kind
there.
of that is a little not the norm though. You think it's like not everybody's like in the classical and then in pop. So that is kind of a little
It
divergent.
is. It's odd, but I it's a very Long Island, New York thing, perhaps. Like,
Oh yeah, I think the whole New York experience and the fact that there's theater in New York, you have Broadway, you do have access to like the big classical, concerts that you can see. So you can
yes,
see these big, you know, orchestral happenings, right? Because
that's right.
you're
I
in a
mean, there's
yeah,
all those bougie places, and the school I went to, and I mean the access that I had to
yeah. I
some
mean, I
of
think you can
the
see
best
that like if you
education.
were
So
in Los Angeles or San Francisco, if you're in New York, you have, Boston, you have access to that, right? There's certain cities
right,
where you have access to an actual orchestra. You have, that they're actually
Yes.
going to, have this Philharmonic Orchestra. You're going to have the Boston Orchestra, the New York. So that gives you that audience. Just in the same way that, you have Broadway and all the actors doing the off-Broadway plays, and, you have
Yeah.
theater and you have film.
And in Long Island, New York, it's the scene from growing up. When I did, and I'm 30, it was rock. It was pop rock, and music like the Plain White Tees around was really popular in Long Island. Like Taking Back Sunday, Bayside. Where I'm from, that kind of like emo screamo rock was really popular. And my band, we were like this kind of like bubblegum pop, more like Plain White Tees meets like Kelly Clarkson, like meets like the Strokes. You know what I mean? Like we were kind of like
I'm
pop.
into that.
So we liked what we did, but in Long Island it was very screamo. So in my community, we had a lot of like people who were mean to me. Like I was bullied for being like pop.
Too pop. Yeah, well, you have
we used to win all the contests around town. We'd enter them and we'd beat the boys. And I'd go to, I was in high school and like battle of bands and whatever, or even the John Lennon songwriting contest. We won second place, by the way, when we should have won first. And they told us on the bus, they were like, by the way, we have to we were gonna let you guys win, but we're giving it to somebody else. I was like, who says this?
Did they have to give it to the boy band to make them feel good? Did they have to give it to the guy band to make them feel good? Yeah.
Seriously. They gave it to another freaking band in my high school. That was a John Lennon songwriting contest. I mean, we got all this free gear. We got microphones. We got a PA system. We got, I think, like a digi-design. I got like a freaking mixing board. Or was that Sam Ash? I'm not sure. We had a lot of sponsors from that one show that ended up sponsoring us, but we shouldn't have second place. But that's the kind of stuff that would happen. I don't know if it was because we were women, because we're Asian. I don't know, but that wasn't right. John Lennon songwriting competition. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's always a problem because I had an issue where I was doing I'm in an African American band. We were playing like punk music, and people were thinking we're supposed to play soul music, right? And we're kind of getting pigeonholed because I like the Clash, right? I like the Sex Pistols. I like the Ramones.
That's horrible.
So we would go in and people were like, well, you guys aren't supposed to. It's like, what do you mean? And I always told well, Chuck Berry was a rock and roller. Little Richard was a rock and roller. Jimi Hendrix was a rock and roller. So why can't I be a rock and roller?
Racist.
Yeah, the idea that a black band can't play rock is like, really? Do you not know who Jimi Hendrix is?
Right? Like, have you not heard of Prince? Like, where are you? Where are you going?
It's like, why is like I was during the period where people were thinking you could only be rock and roll if you were like Ozzy or Eddie Van Halen or Metallica, and people were starting to forget about Hendrix and forget about Little Richard and.
I mean, where do you think rock and roll music came from? The blues. Where do you think the blues came from? Slavery. Black people.
It used to freak me out because I'm I'm really heavy into heavy rock, like Zeppelin type stuff, like Aerosmith type stuff. And people were like, well, why aren't you doing like Luther Vandross? Like, I like Luther. Yeah, I like it. Like, I like soul music. I like Marvin Gaye. But not every black artist is going to do that, right?
So offensive.
Yeah, because there's always going to be a guy that wants to be like a Lenny Kravitz or like a Prince or like a Hendrix, and we shouldn't get pigeonholed that they're all going to be rappers or we're all going to be, R&B. That that if you want to do like jazz, like I want to go play like Sun Ra or Miles Davis, and that's not maybe what's popular today. That's not like playing mumble rap. Not that that's bad, but that's not where my head's at. I'm not going to be a mumble rapper. I'm going to play more like Coltrane or Hendrix.
Yeah. No offense to the mumble rappers, because you guys do your thing, okay?
Yeah, it's just, when something gets big, then people expect everybody to be in that thing, right? So it's like, oh, where's your song? It's like, well, I don't do that.
Right. Oh my God, I know. And as a songwriter, and it's just I'm expected to write all sorts of genres, and I'm just at this point, I don't want to do it.
You gotta write what you feel comfortable about. Like if you're writing, right, you gotta do what you feel. Like if you feel
Yeah,
trance, then you feel trance, right? If you feel
that's what
something
I'm
else,
saying.
you feel for something else, right? So you go with
Yeah.
what you feel. You know you can do a good job, right? So if you know you understand it, right? And it's like, oh, I can do an EDM song because I get it, right? I could do a hip hop song because I get it. I can do a mumble rap song
Yeah.
because I get it. You got to feel it. You know, if you don't feel it, it's not going to be authentic. I think, and people will
Yeah.
figure out that you're not authentic, and then it's like it doesn't work.
I know. And I mean, look, I've had to be that person. It's like, okay, you got a songwriting session. Like that's what happened to me with Marcus Schultz. Summer Dream is I found out about that session and I didn't even know what trance was, but I ended up getting a single on that record. To me, it was like trance is dance music, so I knew and I had some demos, but I hadn't had much experience. And, somebody from Royalty Network had just sent me to the Marcus Schultz session. And
Mhm.
I ended up writing one of the singles. But to me, I'm like, okay, I try to find out what the form is of the song. To me, I was like, okay, trance, 128. I'm going to write a pop song at 128. And that is trance. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trance. Okay.
Well, I mean, as a vocalist, I think you can kind of fit in. It's like I'm kind of the idea that like I kind of play by ear, a lot. So if I fit in with some guys, right, and I don't even know what they're doing, right, I can kind of just
Yeah.
okay, I hear what they're doing and I know what to fill in. So I think a lot of vocalists and lyricists, right, you hear the basic tracks and then you figure out how to
Yeah.
fit in, right?
Right.
And whether it's like trance or country or whatever it is, you can kind of look, I hear the vibe, right? And in being a musician, you'll just naturally figure out how to come in.
Yes. But it has to be an emotional thing when you're writing the song. And when
Yeah.
you get these gigs, you have a job to do, right? First of all, so you better still be able to execute, even though you don't want to write a song and you're not
Mhm.
feeling it that day. You got a
Yeah.
job to do and you better go get the single. That's my mentality, at least. You know what I mean? And I've been doing it for so long that
That's kind of
I
like the
know
Tin
how
Pan
to
Alley.
write it. I
Do you
know
think
how to make
about
it happen.
yeah. Do you think about like songwriters, the classic songwriter, like the Tin Pan Alley songwriters, right? Back in New
Yeah.
York, you had like the Carly Simons, you had all these great Neil Diamond. They were like in these areas in New York, right? And they were kind of like in these factories of songwriting. And they were kind of like what you're saying. They were kind of like, well, you guys got to make a hit, right? So they go
But,
write a
but
song.
Neil Diamond was after Tin Pan Alley, right?
I think he was part of it.
Really, I
He
thought like Tin Pan Alley was like the 20s, right? Like first
No,
Broadway.
the Tin Pan Alley is the area, and into the 50s and 60s, there were
Um,
songwriters that came
okay,
out of
I'm
that,
thinking
right?
wrong,
Right.
wrong years. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's 50s
So
and 60s. Okay,
yeah,
not
so
the
if you
20s.
get
Okay,
so Neil Diamond was a writer before he
okay.
became a big song, a solo act, and so like,
Oh,
and so he had like a bunch of like Carole King,
yeah.
wrote like it
I
wrote.
feel the earth move
Yeah,
on
she was
my
one of
feet.
those songwriters. She wrote songs for other bands. She was writing
Yeah.
songs for tons of bands, and then she decided in the '70s to come out and write her own song. And Neil
Yeah.
Diamond was the same way. He wrote songs for the Monkees, he wrote songs for like all these bands, and then suddenly it became the age of the singer-songwriter. So all these people who were writing these songs for bands suddenly decided, well, I could go out there and do it because I'm giving all these guys, all these other bands my songs,
That's how I
right?
felt. Yeah.
And so that's what you're doing. It feels like that, like 'cause you as a writer, and kind of like like a production, like it's almost like if you think about like a studio musician. Studio
I am
musician,
assuming, yes, that's
yeah,
100%. After I came back from tour, um, I maybe was in my 20s and I moved to LA. I think I was, and even before then, I was in a lot of sessions. But once I moved to LA, I made sure I was
session
in a
player.
session every day for
Well, that's a
years.
working musician. That's how you survive. If you want to be in music, and like sometimes you're not going to be the name in lights in order to do it and be a working musician. You got to be a session player. You got to be a studio musician. You got to be somebody that goes on tour, does the backup,
Right.
and you do production work or whatever. And you can sit there like a Carole King for many years. She went and just wrote for other people. And,
Yeah.
like Neil Diamond, like again, they wrote for other people. And then suddenly they said, I'm going to have my day. I'm gonna get out
That's
there, and then
right.
boom, they got out there, and they got big. And it's rare when you get a really good songwriter that suddenly is able to be that singer-songwriter, and then it's their material, and they're able to control it, right? So
Yeah,
they can get out there and have their voice exactly what they want, and that's when you
yeah.
get, like, this really awesome synergy. I love it talking to singer-songwriters because it's cool to actually talk to the person who wrote the whole thing, you know? You know?
Yeah, it's definitely. I think a lot of people start out like I started out wanting to be an artist. I got good at being a songwriter because I wanted to be an artist.
Mhm,
And I got so many labels being like, oh, well, you're so good in the studio.
mhm.
Like, maybe you're such a good songwriter. Which one are you? Are you an artist or a songwriter? Because you
You're
can't be
both.
both.
Well, you
Because
can't.
you can't be both.
You
That's what
can't be
everyone
both.
tells me. Meanwhile, I'm an artist, a songwriter, a producer. I'm freaking in Logic and GarageBand. I'm like
Yeah.
trying to do I'm mixing my own records, mastering my own records. It took 15 years to get good at this stuff. But I'll tell you what, if you're an artist out there, you can do it. You
Yeah, you
can
have
do
to.
all this stuff, even though people are going to be like, you can't do this. You can only do one. That's
Well,
not
that's because
true.
the industry wants to segment, right? So they wanna make a person all you do is pop lines, all you do is studio you're a studio musician, you're playing the bass, right? They wanna separate it so that there's certain niches and people are in those
But
niches,
there's
but
people who can do it all, and
yeah,
I'm one of them. Do you know what I
yep,
mean? There are
yeah.
people, and if you just keep discouraging people, then how are they going to keep develop their skills? But you only become good at things because you did it, right? So if
Yeah, I
everybody's like,
mean, yeah,
"Are you
I
only an
never
artist?" Like it's like, no, you're not just an artist. Your job is to write hit songs.
yeah,
That's your job. You
I
know?
think a lot of people get caught up in this idea that they gotta work with a producer and they're not actually gonna write the lion's share of the song, right? They're gonna do the top line, they're gonna sing it, right? But
And
then
they're probably right if they're not a hit songwriter. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're probably not writing a hit if that's like something that's happening in your session. Like you know, how much copyright are you really getting on these songs? Like let's
Yeah,
look at the numbers. You know,
yeah,
because
it's probably that producer, the mega producer's getting 80%, you're getting 20 or 10, you
yeah,
know?
because he can write a song in 30 seconds because he does this breakfast, lunch, and dinner and has been for 20 years.
Yeah,
Do you know
because you
what I
get
mean?
the mega producers, they got the certain style, and then they just rotate the vocalist in, they rotate other people in, and it's
That
really
same
they're getting the
template,
lion's
they
share.
open it up. But hey, that's smart. You know, all these
Yeah,
templates and how these producers work these days. I think Steven Slate, I saw he has all these templates you can buy now. And you just open up your session and it just mixes for you. You have a vocal chain, you know, are you a female soprano or something? I think you
yeah,
probably
yeah.
put in like your characteristics of your voice and your sex, and then you're like, okay, you have a freaking vocal chain. They're like mixing and mastering for you. Like it's just crazy where we are. But you obviously still need some skill set to like work, you know, a DAW, and you know, you're not just putting out hopefully crap, you know, and just using these
Well,
presets.
yeah,
But I
I
think
mean,
it's
that's
still
kinda
helpful.
where I kinda, like, have been, I'm a big purveyor of, like, old school recording, so
Oh, for
I don't
sure.
even use a DAW. I pretty much just use all my hardware instruments and track it like the old
Wow.
days. So
Okay.
so
Still.
yeah, I don't use the DAW at all. I do everything, I track it manually, I play every note manually. So it's just a different way of doing it, but that's not what
Yeah.
people do because
To
that's
give
not
you
what
like a
people do.
round of applause for that, like, you know,
Well, that's because I
like,
feel like, okay, if I'm gonna do it the way I want, that's gonna make my sound really different than anybody else's because I'm not using all these templates, and I'm not using all these loops, I'm not using all that. I'm kinda just
that's
doing what
true.
I feel, right? And so it's gonna come out a certain way. It's kinda like if you deal with a traditional rock band. If you think about, like, a Eddie Van Halen, he wasn't using any template. That's all the band playing that down, right? You get a band like, like Black
Yeah.
Sabbath. That's all those bands, you think about
Live
like,
in the same room.
yeah, yeah, the guys actually putting it down that's kind of the tradition I come from, is actual like full rock bands that actually put stuff down and aren't using
Wow.
stuff. So that's kind of like where my head's at. But
That makes me sound very young. So, I mean, I'm like definitely in the doll. I grew up with the doll
yeah,
always in
yeah.
my sessions. But props to you doing all that hard work. Perfect performance over here. And the Tone King, Keith.
Well, I think it's just a different style because I know there's so many people. I think the DAW allows a lot of people to do music that maybe couldn't have done it before. And allows people to
Yeah,
put down a level of perfection that you would have to take 6 months to do before. You would have had to go to Sunset Studios or Olympia and actually
yeah,
have a full production team to be able to do it. And now you can do it
right,
by yourself. It's just a different. There's still musicians that kind of want to do it the old way,
right.
and a certain level, and it's harder. I never tell anybody that doing it without a DAW is not easier. It's you're kind of making it hard on purpose because you want to do it that way. It's a choice, So you choose to do it that way because you're trying to do something a certain way. You're trying to so it's a goal that not everybody's gonna want to do, but it's something that more and more bands are starting to think about it because they want to sound less in the box. So if you want to
Right.
sound less in the box, you got to sound more like a natural band, more
Yeah. It
like
depends on the record and what
yeah,
kind of song you're making. It
yeah,
depends. If you need a live drummer, there's no way that you could. Sure, I do. Okay, yeah, I do it. I'm on my keyboard and I'm like, I'm the drummer.
it's
Right?
kind of drummer, yeah.
But come
There's
on,
nothing like
like,
a
we're
real
talking about
drummer.
total quality. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
mean, if you think about like
It's different.
a Motown drummer, right? Think about modern drums today, right?
Right.
And go listen to a Motown song with a natural drummer,
It
right?
is not a guy in his room going
Yeah,
on the
a
keyboard. You
natural
know what
drummer
I mean?
on
You
like a
can't do that.
Marvin Gaye song or a Supreme
Right.
song or the Four
It's
Tops.
just wrong.
It's
It would
just
just
so
be wrong to do that. It's not
yeah,
how it's recorded.
yeah. If you
It's
think about it,
offensive.
you get bands today that do like retro soul. So if you have a
Yeah.
retro soul band, they'll actually get a real drummer, real bass player, real guitar players, and they'll put it down like Motown, or they'll
And
put
hey,
it down.
let's give them jobs. Why are
Yeah,
you taking away the drummers' jobs?
yeah. Well, I think there's something about that natural drum sound in a soul song, like a Motown song or a Stax song
Yes.
or like a Philly soul song. There's
And when they're
nothing
all
like
playing together, all
yeah,
playing together, you
if you have
know?
like a real horn section, like trombones and saxes and trumpets, and there's something about that. Like if you listen to Earth, Wind, and Fire, you can't do that in the box. It's very
It's just
difficult.
different. Yeah. I mean, I've made pop funk records and they sound phenomenal. But they are not Earth, Wind, and Fire. Like you have to have the groove. We're talking about musicians so locked in. They rehearse together. They wrote
Yeah,
the song together. You
yeah,
know
they
what I
kind of
mean?
live
They're in
together.
the
They
same
live. They,
room, but
it's
you're
like a
just
living.
different.
It's like the Grateful Dead,
Like
right?
Daft Punk.
You ain't gonna sound like the Grateful Dead unless you're like a hippie, right? Like the whole idea of the Grateful Dead was this hippie aesthetic, right? The Dead used to play 6-hour concerts. They
Oh
used to
yeah.
go and do one song for an hour, one song
Yeah.
for an hour. Like you say, it's a different type of vibe. It's like it's not a 2-minute song. It's like an hour long. Song. you know,
I
it's,
know.
it's a different type of thing that when you go that way, it demands like a different aesthetic. And so, but to me, it's like everything is cool. And like I said, like not everybody wants to listen to an hour long Grateful Dead song. Some people want to hear a 2-minute
Right.
trance song or EDM song, right? Because they don't have the patience for an hour long song.
Right. Like I mean, I have friends who are into that, and I just can't do it. My classical mind is like, where's the melody? Where is the form? Like, why is it not like catchy? Like, I'm like, I just can't like do it, And I'm like, hey, this is where everybody has different tastes in music, guys. So, you know what I mean? Everybody's
Yeah.
gonna like a different thing.
But I think it's just music is just, to me, it's kind of personal taste. Like everybody has, some people use music to kind of zone out, right? Some people use it to go jogging. Some people sit with a vinyl record listening to Pink
Yeah.
Floyd every single line, right? Because they want to know the whole story, right? Some people listen to music and they want to hear a rock opera and they actually want to know a story, right?
Yeah.
And so some people just want it to relax and to, fall asleep. Some people want to use it for whatever they want to use it for. So
To
everybody's
party.
yeah, it's just personal decisions. Like I just want to hear the bass and I don't even care what somebody's singing. Right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
people that bounce the songs, they have no idea what the lyrics are. And if they did, they probably were like, "Oh, I didn't know that." you know?
Oh God, I don't even know my lyrics half the time, so I understand.
Yeah. I mean, some people are so beat focused, it doesn't really matter what the singer says. It's like it's more what the beat is. Um,
That's
uh,
true. And
and so
many
it does. Yeah.
culturally music, like
And,
what is that, Galamian? I know they have like it's all bells or all rhythmic.
but I
So
sometimes I like to listen to foreign music, right? So I don't know. I was listening to an Italian singer. I don't understand Italian, but I like the
mhm,
way it sounded, right? It's like if you go to opera, right? If you go to
okay.
the opera, you're gonna hear all this Italian, you're gonna hear all this Latin, and you
Right.
might not know what it means, but you hear the beauty in the song.
And
And
that's
so
called bel canto because you're hearing old Italian opera or something that would be like, oh my God, the most beautiful time
it's
of
beautiful, but
singing.
you don't even know what it
Yeah.
means if you're not that dedicated. You might not know exactly what they're saying, but you
Yeah,
can
unless you're Italian.
appreciate yeah, but you can appreciate the beauty of it, right? You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
and I
I
started
love Il
listening
Volo. They're
to
my you got to check out Il Volo if you like
Nicole.
Italian singing. I think that these guys they're like a boy band. They're very famous, but
That's
they're
cool. I've been
wonderful.
listening to a lot of, like, Chinese and Japanese music,
Oh my God,
just
that's
'cause
cool. I'm gonna need you to send me some of that because
'cause it's
I
really cool.
need to listen more Chinese music for sure.
Well, it's this interesting their approach, and then the language has different beauty in it, and sometimes it's like people say, "Oh, you should get the translation." I say the thing is, like, in certain languages, if you translate it, it doesn't sound right, right? You actually have to hear it in its language in the native language to really feel it.
Yeah,
Like I was talking to a spoken word Italian poet, and I did an interview with her, and all of her poetry is in Italian. And if you translate it, it loses a lot of what it really means because it's very Italian focused, what she's talking about.
yeah,
And so if you try to translate it, you lose the intention. And so I
that's right.
actually like to listen to it in Italian just because it sounds the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, like the feeling of it, and you don't know what they're saying, but you feel it.
Yeah, you feel it. You can feel it as a human being. You don't
Yeah,
have to always know every word to kinda get
yeah,
the emotion. I think your ears and your mind can kind of pick up the heart in it, and if
yeah,
you don't have to be, "Oh, I don't know what," some people are like that, like, if they don't understand what it is, they can't even listen. Some people are such that they have to know what it means or they don't wanna listen. But
yeah,
yeah, so, I mean, that's a different type of person. I think as you get into music as a fan, I'm a fan of music probably before being a musician, and so I've
yes,
kind of opened up to so many genres and so many different things that I don't mind listening to a Russian punk band, and I don't know what they're saying,
right.
but I feel what they're doing, right? I listen to a
That's
Polish
true.
band,
I
right?
know. Yep.
I listen
I
to
love this that we're just getting into like we're just talking about like there's so much music out there. It's crazy, but love that.
but I just think it's cool to know as a musician that you should, appreciate music kind of for what it is and not try to make it, into something. I think when you love something and you think it's beautiful, you kind of accept what it is, right? You don't try to put expectations on it. You see it or you feel it, and then suddenly like you kind of let it speak to you, and
Yes.
you don't have any preconceived notions about it. You just let it present itself. Then I think you can enjoy it.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel composing is as well. Like it shouldn't be some laborious process of like, why can't I write a song? It should just let it happen and just feel it. and just be in your body and just hear it and just flow with it. You know what I mean? I think that's a really good tip I've given to many people who are looking to get into songwriting is just throw out all the stuff that's in your brain that's making it so hard. Just
So
think
that's
of
a
it as like,
question I
I'm
have.
gonna like
Yeah.
go take a walk, I'm gonna go do the dishes, I'm gonna pet my dog, I'm hanging out. Maybe a song comes in, maybe you're not writing a song that day. You know, like don't make it a struggle, because as soon as you're kind of like resisting, then you're gonna have resistance in your composition. You're gonna have problems.
Yeah. So I was wondering, like, so when you write, do you find that you mostly like the feel that you just kind of like I started in poetry, right? So this idea in poetry is that there's a muse, right? And it means that there's this outside inspiration that somehow the lines are coming from outside of you, right? That somehow you tapped into it. And I think a lot of times musicians, once you have a certain skill set as a musician, right? You hear something and then you automatically know what goes with it, right?
Yeah,
And you can feel it. If somebody gives you like a bass line, you know what to put with it, right? Somebody gives
right.
you a chord, you know what to do with it, and it just kind of people like it don't know how to create, don't understand how musicians or creative people can do that, but it just like seems
Yeah,
to come out of nowhere. But it really isn't nowhere. It's like all your experience as a
that's
musician is like
right.
muscle memory. It's like musical
That is
memory,
exactly it.
and you kind of know what goes with what, and you can
Right.
feel something, and you know what to do. And it's like
Yes.
people who aren't creative don't understand it because they don't create.
Right. And if you're starting the creative process too, it can be hard because you don't know how, or you don't know what to do, right? Like you're like, should I rewrite my song 10 times? You're like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? You're like, no,
Yeah, yeah,
sweetie, like stop. Like stop rewriting anything. You know what I mean? Like
yeah. You
just
kind of
stop
have a
making
gut
it
feel.
hard for
I think if
you.
if you've been a musician for a long time, you have a gut feel for what your best effort is, right? And sometimes I find myself like I might go into something and I might go overdub something like 10 times, right? But then because I'm trying to be a perfectionist, right? But then I
Yeah,
go back and I say like the third take might have mistakes in it, but it actually is so much better than the last 7, then
yeah,
I'd rather go with that one because that one feels better. And I'll accept whatever errors in it because it
right.
actually is the better track. And that's hard
Yeah,
to like show people. Sometimes you have to accept some level of imperfection to actually have something that's good.
that's true. I mean, but you're specifically talking about in the recording process, right? I'm talking about in the composition process, but I do agree with you in, that overdubbing something and having the record sound absolutely right is meant for the record and solely that purpose of making that right. But in the
Mhm.
composition period, I feel like it should be, you don't have to rewrite it 10 times, right? Like you shouldn't be so conflicted if you're beginning. Do you know what I mean? Because you
Yeah,
you like
yeah.
doubting
Initial
yourself.
demo. Well, I think the
You know,
initial demo, you let it be what it is, right? So
yes. And you
if
need to
it,
follow your inner ear.
yeah,
Like, what do you think sounds good? What It's not about you though, it's about the music as well. That's what I like to tell people. It's not even up to you. It's like, where does this go?
yeah.
What
When I
chord
put it,
goes here?
yeah,
Where's this melody going? And where are we harmonically going to support the melody? And that's how I write. It's I hear if you hear or you hear progression, you're going to fill in the melody
hmm
in that progression. But it should be easy. And I try to tell people like, just try to relax and just let it happen.
So
And
do you feel like I over time what I've done like when I was younger, with my band, we would start stop start stop. When you're with like four
yeah,
guys in the basement, right? You start stop all the time, right?
totally, totally.
But,
I know.
but,
Yeah, and
but
you're all arguing over.
argue about what should be what. But then like if you go by yourself and you're on the piano, right, or you're on your
Right.
guitar, I would just let the tape play and put something down, right? And then it's like
Yeah,
I'm not going to keep on starting and stopping. I'm going to
yeah,
actually put down the complete thought, and then maybe I'll do another variation of it, but I'll let it be
sure. Yes.
that stream of consciousness kind of complete thought, and then it's like later I might tweak it, but I'll let the demo be what it is.
Correct. And that's what I believe is songwriting. Just that process right there. Because you let that happen, before just rewriting and stopping and doubting yourself. You know what I mean? Like stopping yourself before you could create something. So you just need to let that happen. And hey, if you only have a chorus, that's fine. If you only have a phrase, whatever. Like maybe you'll come back to it, and that's okay. But don't be like, I've been rewriting this song for 10 years. Like, you know what I mean? Like, even though I've done that too, but I also put out hit songs and make sure I do a job. But I'm also crazy enough to rewrite a song for 10 years or more. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I do that just for fun.
There's always like the story, like, I don't know if you've heard, like Bruce Springsteen took 6 months to do Born to Run. Right. Just kept on recording it. And it just was never done, right? It wasn't like the band complained that like it wasn't natural, right? They just kept on hitting this song over and over 6 months. They just kept on hitting it, right? And it's like that seems like a very torturous thing to do. But I guess they were trying to get this Phil Spector wall of sound with it.
Trust me, I understand, and I've done the same thing with my best friend Tim Young. We have a song called Cat Fancy that still isn't released, and that we have had over who knows how many mixes and artists that we've kicked off the song, that we've added to the song. We've revamped the song. We have people talking.
Never done. You always have one song that's never done. You always have a song like you have these expectations for it, and then you don't like it, right? And then if you have a band listen to it, like they probably like the first version, like without the overdubs. Like I like this version, like with just a acoustic guitar. I don't need all this layer. Like, just do this one.
I feel like the point is never released. Like that's the only sentence that matters, where it was never made it anywhere. Like
well, I think sometimes the things that you have to spend so much time on, you don't release, because it's like the things that are more natural are easier to kind of handle.
Yes. And this was a pet project. It was something we were both It was for fun. Of course, we're both seasoned songwriters. We're not, rewriting because we're at a loss for a melody or something.
Yeah, you're going for something. Like I've been with bands and like, people wouldn't agree on the direction, right? So nobody agreed. So then they couldn't put it out because nobody agreed on the way it should be.
Oh, God. I know. And that's why you don't write with your band.
Well, some bands are kind of like, they like to, I've been in bands where everybody kind of had 25, 4-piece band, right?
Oh, God.
And it's kind of hard because it's like everybody got to vote. And when it was like, I'm kind of like that. Later, I had bands where like I was doing 80%, and that worked better.
Wait, what did you say that you were doing 80%?
I was doing like pretty much writing all the parts.
Yeah.
I pretty much would
like that better. Okay, that's funny.
Yeah, well, I liked it better just because it was less of a problem with people disagreeing.
I have allergies, by the way. This isn't COVID, all of the coughing.
Okay. That's okay.
I can't breathe.
I think sometimes it's like everybody has an equal say, then nobody agrees, and then it never gets done. And so it's like somebody has to take the lead and make a decision. And so what I found is like, okay, if you have a situation where you have a band where like I know what I want, and then the other guys kind of okay, they agree with it and they put their piece in, but they kind of agree with it, like the overall blueprint of the song. Right. And then they like the bass player is going to do a better bass than my bass. It might has a keyboard bass, right? So a real bass player is going to play that better, right? So I was like, fine. He take my original idea and make it better. Like, and take the drummer, takes my drum machine 808 and makes a real drum out of it, and it makes that better. But the original idea of it might have been all mine, and then it gets made into something that still has like a lot of what I wrote in the demo is still there. It's just got better. And so the whole point is like, if you have a band that can take your demo and make it better, that's what you want. You don't want to take the demo and make it worse.
Like the Beatles, I guess. The Beatles is a good example of that.
Yeah. They could take, like John and Paul would write something, and Ringo and George Harrison would add to it and make it better than what it was.
Right. But how often do you have John Lennon, Paul McCartney,
Yeah.
need I keep going, George Harrison, you know
And
what I
Ringo
mean?
Starr,
Same
yeah.
band. Like,
And then
let's
you
be
have
real.
the fifth Beatle. Then you have George Martin, the fifth Beatle, who's their
Yeah,
producer, who adds
right.
all the backward tape loops and all the other stuff and the orchestration. And he kind of knew what to do. So he
I think
would
it's too many cooks in the kitchen. I think so, because I mean, I don't know. I think four people sometimes writing a song. I don't want to write a song with four people personally.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
I don't want to write a song with four people. Sorry, my earring keeps caught.
No, I
No,
think it's a hard thing to do. I think it's like it's hard to get like agreement. Like you have bands like Pink Floyd, the whole band would mix. They'd go into the studio and every member would be on the mixing board mixing their part, right? And so
yeah, that's
they
kind
all
of cool, actually.
it's kind of cool because they actually what happened was then the bass player made sure that his bass line was heard. The
Yeah,
keyboard player made sure that his part was heard in the way that they thought it should be heard, and the singer made sure his part, and then the guitar. So what happened was it was like okay, they all agreed like in a democracy, and it
yeah.
came out better, and it wasn't a lot of conflict. They seemed to agree on the direction. So you had a
And they're Pink
situation.
Floyd.
Yeah, the Pink Floyd is
Yeah,
famous for making like The Wall and Wish You Were Here and all these great albums, and they have a lot of complexity. If you listen to them, there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of stuff going on, and they
yeah.
all had a part in it, and they all made decisions. So that's where it kind of worked, where you had like
That's true. Okay. Yeah.
so it can work if you have have a good relationship in the
I
band.
guess you know what it is? I don't need other people to write my songs.
But some people are like Prince, like you're like a Prince, like Prince
Yeah,
could do it all by yourself. Like you're like that,
yeah,
right? You can do it all by
right.
yourself. Yeah, some people are
Exactly.
like
So
that.
it's like I don't, not that I don't really want you, kind of don't want you, but I don't need you. But I would love to write with amazing songwriters who all they do is songwrite. Because
Mhm.
just because you're a drummer doesn't make you a songwriter.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know what
yeah.
I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
it's
mean,
like,
some people could like let it go and it's like, okay, the drummer's gonna add to it, and he's not exactly the songwriter, but he's maybe added a better piece than what I could have done on my tapping my
yeah,
finger, you know.
yes. But the worst is when like the drummer's telling you, "Oh, maybe this
Change the
melody
chords.
is better," and you're like, "Oh my lord!" Like,
Yeah, I think some people don't appreciate it if a drummer tells you to change your chord progression. Then you're
right,
like,
like certain things that a drummer shouldn't do. Like, you go write the rhythm section. Like,
yeah.
please do you know? I'll write the melodies and whatever. And
Unless you run into a guy like a Don Henley who actually could sing and do the drums for the Eagles. So
there
Don
you go.
Henley,
Okay, right.
he was a
Yeah.
singer, right? And he
So
could
are
play
all the
guitar.
drummers out there, by the way. I have a lot of friends who are drummers. Not to say you're
Yeah,
not good songwriters, but you know,
yeah. I think you have
sometimes
to have a
they like
certain
kind of
type. If you get like a Phil Collins, right? Phil Collins is a drummer and a singer for Genesis, right? He was
yeah.
famous for being able to drum and to be able to sing. So he kind of knew if Tony Banks, the keyboard player, should play a different arrangement because he's singing the
Okay.
song, right?
He
So
knew when those drums would come in, like ba 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 ba
he would
ba.
do the drums, but he also could actually tell the guitar player and the keyboard player maybe they should change what they're doing to fit where his voice was coming in.
Right,
So
like the chords
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
So that's where you have a singer like a Don Henley is a drummer singer, Phil Collins is a drummer singer. There's from the famous Canadian band, The Band. They
I
used to
used
play
to
with
play
Dylan.
drums as well too. So I grew up. I played drums too. So that is part
That's
of the
probably
Mia
why
Koo
you
roster.
can do everything. 'Cause it's
I
like
know. I know. Yeah. I could do anything.
well, I think it's good to be able to be on like you know guitar, right? You
Yeah.
also you knew what you could do violin
Violin, guitar,
and
singing, drums. I mean, bass is pretty much
you learn
guitar.
piano and you learn
Besides the
piano.
other last two strings, I play. I mean, I'm not a classical pianist, so I don't like to say that I play piano because I don't play piano, but I can play. You know what I mean? I can play
Well,
well, like
I
root
think
position
people yeah,
triad, very well.
what I think is interesting though is some people kind of go down this thing, right? Like if you're a guitar player, right, you can't play like Hendrix or you can't play like Van Halen, so you say you can't play guitar, right? But if a singer-songwriter picks up a guitar and you write a song from your heart, that guitar will sound really good if you play it with your song. And you might
Yeah.
not be as technically good as Hendrix or Zappa or any great guitar player, right? But for that song, you're the best player, right? So sometimes not having like perfect capability, but being a singer songwriter, you could actually play a keyboard part or a guitar part that actually
That's
really
true.
fits what you're doing.
That's true. I just don't want to offend any classical pianists out there because I
Yeah.
don't like to say that I'm a piano player, but I've also had people bring in a piano player during a session and be like, "Why am I here?" They're like, "You play better than me." And
That's
then
what
I'm
I'm
like,
saying. Because sometimes the songwriter, what I'm trying to say is
"Yeah,
songwriters, sometimes it's better if you actually play the instrument than somebody else because you know the song. As a
yeah."
singer-songwriter, right, you know, and maybe there are technically people better than you, but emotionally, you actually did a better choice in what you chose to play,
But
and
as
it
a
fits the
session
song.
musician, shouldn't they be able to like, come on, you know what I mean? If you're a keyboard player or pianist, it's like you better, and you call yourself that, you better show up to the session ready to be a chameleon and to kill that record, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, you should be able to, but I'm saying I'm
Right.
kinda of the mind that it's cool to have singer-songwriters that actually play a
Yeah,
guitar or thing, and they don't have to be like, Bob Dylan's not the most perfect guitar player in the world, right? But when he
okay,
plays his
that's true.
guitar with his
Right.
songs, it fits his voice, right?
Yeah,
And it
good
actually
point.
works better than guitar players that are 10 times better than him. Sometimes
Yeah.
there are songs that when he actually plays it, it fits better. So that's what I'm saying. So even technically, you could have somebody that could do better, but sometimes, like when you play it
Yeah.
yourself, it fits what you're doing.
That's so true, actually. Okay. I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that because there's a certain element of emotional connection that you also have to the song. That's
Yeah,
nobody's
and
gonna
even if the
understand.
guy's technically better, they might not be feeling the mood you're in, right? So
Right,
it's
where the
hard to
accents are and the
yeah,
dynamics that you're hearing, because you have to translate that as a songwriter, producer, and be like, okay, we're gonna have a dynamic that happens here. And that has to be, and if you play it, then you can really help the arrangement for
yeah,
sure. Definitely.
yeah.
It's
I
very observant. It's
yeah,
true.
I think that's in the '70s. You used to see a lot of that. You used to see a lot of people that decided to just play it themselves. And a good example is people didn't realize that Karen Carpenter played drums, right?
She
She's a
did.
drummer. Yeah, and
You
she
know that.
actually played drums on a lot of Carpenter records, and,
Wow.
she was told to not do it when she played live, but if you listen to the Carpenter records and those drums are because Karen actually felt where those parts should go, and there maybe were guy drummers that could do a better job or whatever, but what
Right.
she felt and how she played them, those parts,
Yeah.
she actually did a better job because
A
she
hundred
actually
percent. Yeah.
feel it. Yeah, so that's why I'm getting a good example is, like, people didn't realize that she actually can play, and there are actually some video of her playing some classic Carpenter songs on the drums with a mic, and it's seeing
Oh my
her
God. I
sing
need to look
sing
that up.
and
I
hit
think
the
I might have
drums.
seen that, but I
Yeah,
forgot she played drums.
yeah, and it's beautiful because when you see her that voice, and then she actually is feeling the drums, and it's just so perfect.
Crazy.
It's
I
really
gotta check
perfect.
that out.
Yeah, it's awesome because it kind of I try to I like to tell like young female like people who are in bands like young women, and I'm like, look at Karen Carpenter playing the drums on these songs. I actually showed one the girl I was working with, and I was like, that is so awesome. It's like you if you can play the drums and sing, you should try it because it's like
Yeah.
very powerful if you can get that across. I think
God,
that can
I
make
don't
a
think
show.
I'd be able to do that
It's a
because
hard thing to
that's
do, but if you
hard.
actually can do it, but you rather be upfront, I'm kind of the guy that I think as a fan, I actually like seeing Karen Carpenter behind the drums more than seeing her in front of the mic. I thought that was
Yeah.
like more impressive to me, but
Oh well, it's so much harder to do. I mean,
yeah,
and with her voice and the way she sings, it's like to
Yeah.
support properly while playing the drums, not being out of breath and hitting those notes and making, smooth lines.
And when she
Like,
did it, it was like
wow,
really beautiful to see her do it. And like
wow,
every
I
time I
gotta
ever
check that out.
seen her do it, I was like, wow, I love it.
That's so crazy. That's like, I mean, she's Karen Carpenter, of course. It makes
Yeah.
so much sense.
But that's like, like everybody has somebody you look up to. And it's like I would say like Karen Carpenter and Jimi Hendrix. It's like, how can you put those two in the same thing? But like if you think about
Yeah.
songwriter or singer-songwriter, like Karen was so amazing and how she could deliver a song. And I think it really is a good lesson to any songwriter if you listen to a Carpenter song and you watch a video of her singing and you see
Oh,
how
yeah.
much she puts into it. That to
Oh,
me is like,
yeah.
if you're gonna do it, you should like do it. You know, you know,
Yes. That
it's
is a really good point. I didn't think you were going to say that, but when you brought that up, I was like, when you do it, you should really do it. Yeah, you can't go out there half-butted. You
yeah, I
got to
mean,
go
you
out
see her
there
putting
and
like she looks like she's putting her whole soul into it, and
yeah,
that to me, and maybe that's too much because I think some people are like, well, I don't know if I can give that much because then there's like I don't have anything left for me. But there's some artists like when they perform, they kind of give so much of themselves that it's like really powerful. And I think if you can
yeah.
do it, you should try to do it.
I love that. And I try to give myself on stage for sure. And I love that vulnerability when you feel like they're just telling a story. It's like acting, you know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
have to like emote and that's half of the battle on stage, obviously the technical part and then being a good musician and then you have to be musical. I mean, musical is emotion. If there is no emotion in your music, it's not music, right?
So this is the question, like when you are on stage, do you feel like you become somebody else or do you feel you're still yourself? Like, do you have like a stage self that's different than your normal self? Like, if you go to perform, do you feel that that is the same person that's talking to me is
Yeah,
the person that sings?
it is because all my songs are written about my life and I've always written from a very honest place. So when I'm performing, I'm emoting to feel because I learned the first thing in music is if you don't have a connection in the feeling to the other audience or people, it's not music. So it's very important, not only the technical, but you also have to connect in a way that makes people feel. Otherwise, it's not music. That's 101. That's what my mom taught me very young.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing because you don't want to be like what they say, like phoning it in.
I love that term for that.
No,
Yeah.
because I've been with bands like, and you get into a groove and you keep on playing the same thing every night and you got the set list, right? And then like if it becomes boring for you, right? If you're not excited, like the whole reason I got into music is like I want to be excited about doing it. I
Yeah.
would never want to be in a position where like every night I'm feel like I'm just phoning it in and I don't really care. It's like 'cause
Phoning it in.
no, but it's like if it becomes like a 9 to 5 job, it's like, what? Why am I doing it? And it's like that's
Right.
not
Who
what it's
wants
supposed
to
to be.
see that? Nobody wants to see that. You go to a show for an experience, so you better deliver. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that's being a professional. That's part of being a professional. If you can't sell them and emote and connect with your audience and that emotional delivery, you got to work on that in your performance for sure. It's very important.
yeah. I think it's just like you got to get to a point where you're not just you don't want to be like Milli Vanilli and like just voicing over something.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's just something you have to learn too as a musician. And if nobody tells you that tip, it is very integral to connecting because nobody wants to just hear you go up there and just la 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 la. They
Yeah,
they need to feel it. Otherwise, they're not going to be your fan. They're not going to connect with you. You've got to connect. That's how you
that,
make friends.
that's one thing. Like when I used to go see Prince, man, I saw Prince a bunch of times,
Oh my
and the
God.
one
I've
thing
seen
I
it
love,
one time. It was crazy.
I seen him like 3, 4 times, but And the coolest time I ever saw him was at Paisley Park, and he used to like in his house, like in
Where is that? Is
Minneapolis.
that in Brooklyn? Paisley
No,
Park?
it's in Paisley Park's in Minneapolis.
Oh, okay.
Prince is from Minneapolis, but Paisley
Okay.
Park is his studio. He built a house that's his studio. He has this big like
Wow.
production
Cool.
facility. After he did Purple Rain, he went and took a bunch of money, millions of dollars, and he built this giant production facility that's his studio in his house, right? And so
Okay.
in his house had like 3 studios with like professional equipment, so he could just record everything there. He had sound stages, he had movie stages in there. You could film stuff. He filmed some of his movies in
Yeah.
there. And
Wow.
so if you went to go see him at that place, he had a whole stage, and you could see him with his band play.
In the
And
house?
yeah, well, it's not just a normal house, like a mansion. But
Right,
it
right.
had, it's like a record like facility. It's like it had like
Right.
seats.
Yeah.
It's like an auditorium. Like if you ever seen
Okay.
the movie Sign of the Times, he actually filmed Sign of the
Never.
Times at Paisley Park. Paisley Park had like an auditorium inside of it. That's his
What
house.
is the Sign of the Times?
Sign of the Times is one of his albums. One of
Okay.
Prince's albums. It's a double album from '87.
Okay.
And he actually did a film at Paisley Park for the album, and it's him playing live at Paisley Park. But the thing I'm saying is, like, when I went to see him, he had this ability to change his songs. He wouldn't play them the same way. And so when you saw him in a small
Well,
setting with maybe 400 or 500 people, he would do alternate versions of his songs that had different lyrics, different lines, everything. He didn't do it the same way. And if you would see him at different nights, he would actually change it. And I thought that was cool because it felt like he didn't feel like he had to keep it the same way. He felt like
yeah.
if he wanted to change it, he'd change it based on however he felt. And if he felt a certain way, he was going to change the song. And I think that's kind of cool. To me as a
Definitely.
fan, I like that because it gave me variation. And as a Prince collector, I collect a lot of Prince material, and I've got multiple variations of songs he wrote. That way he has different versions, and it's like he'd hold it and then change it, and
Yeah.
there's versions of songs he had like in 1978 that he released in like 87, and he had that song structure in 78, and then he released it in like 87. So he had songs he would hold on for years and then put them out, and he would just change them. And it's just I think there's just really cool to have a guy like that did that kind of level of stuff.
Yeah. Definitely. I love that. Well, you always got to mix it up
Yeah,
live for sure. It's part of the show,
Yeah, it's just cool to have that kind of live capability. So I mean, there's
Definitely.
some people today that want to hear the same as the record. They just want to hear the song the way it was on the record. But then, I like to hear bands that actually mix it up.
Yeah, and there's also some people who will lip sync it too.
Well,
From
yeah,
the
it's like Milli Vanilli. And then you catch them when the tape breaks, and you're like, it's like, hey,
Yeah, and then they're like,
are you trying to do that for real? It's like, no, I guess it's skipping.
yeah, I mean, but hey, I understand that certain shows, like if you're doing the Super Bowl, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like certain shows have like probably
certain
so much
shows-
money is involved in that. It's like, who
Well, I
knows?
think also there's a lot of if you have dancers and you have a lot of choreography, I can understand that for the dancers, you might have to keep things stable, right? And so
Yeah.
if you have to keep it stable, then you have to have it kind of set, right? Going off the DAW on a loop and on a bunch of sequence tracks. They're multi-tracked, and maybe you have some that are muted and some are not muted, and you're doing some of them live and some of them aren't. Some of them are just going off the machine. But like if you don't have a bunch of dancers doing a choreographed routine, then like, why do you have to have it so tight? Why don't you just play it?
You're like, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm kind of of the mind, I'd rather play it.
they'll always have the tempo, and then there'll be a backing track. So the drummer has to have the in-ears going on, and then they're playing that to a click because it must be in time with the fake vocals, they're coming out.
Yeah,
So
that's the thing. Is I kind of come from the age before you had all these backing tracks.
Yeah.
You actually had like people singing the backing tracks.
Yeah.
Or people playing. So what happened is like maybe
I'm laughing because I'm like, what is that?
Maybe you've got 32 tracks, but you only play what you can physically play, right? So back in the day when I was playing, right, you might have 16 tracks on your recorder, right? But when you go to play live, you only play like 6 of them because that's all your band can play, right? So you didn't try to do it. You just played a version, the live version. The live version doesn't sound like the studio version. The studio version is its own version, right? So when you go to play live, you don't have to do the click track. You just play it, and so that's a different type of thing. It's hard to get people to do that anymore.
Okay, hold on. Sorry, I got to pick up my dog because he needs some cuddles.
We're probably near the end. We've gone a little long, but
I do appreciate having me, Keith. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I feel like we've touched on some important subjects and very musical conversations.
I love to just kind of go, into it, kind of stream of consciousness.
Me too. I mean, we're just having a convo. So thank you everybody for tuning in.
Well, I think your dog wants some loving, so I'll let you have it.
I know. He's like, Mommy, this is real.
Mommy, I want to talk to you.
He's little. He doesn't want to turn. Let's see if we can get his face. Honey,
I see that he needs attention.
He needs a lot. Yeah, he does. But thank you for having me.
Yeah, this will be with the permanent links I will send you, and it's gonna also get converted for all your fans. We're gonna be on Spotify. We're gonna be on Apple Podcasts within an hour. You'll start seeing that happen.
Okay, perfect. Send me a link and then I'll promote it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Bye.